right, welcome to the last webinar within my HBCU Educate webinar series as the HBCU Division Chair for NASPA Region 3. And today's topic is career exploration in Black First Gen students, particularly at HBCUs. So as you all are coming into the room, as I say, I am going to put some information in the chat should you need text captioning. So I will put that information in the chat should you need that. And as always, if you have questions or comments, please place those in the chat throughout. And we will have a Q&A towards the end of today's conversation. So we're gonna give individuals a couple of more minutes to come into the room, and then we'll get started. So once again, those who are just tuning in, I am putting in the chat a link should you need text captioning for this event. And we will start momentarily. All right, so let's get into this conversation. I'm excited for a couple of reasons. One, I'm excited that this conversation closes up not only the first gen series that we've been focused on in February, but also it closes my tenure as the HBC Division Chair for the region. And the last part is that we have a dope, phenomenal guest here to engage us into this conversation. So I'm excited. So career exploration in Black First Gen students at HBCUs is what we're talking about today. And before we get heavy into the conversation, I want to give our guest or my guest the opportunity to tell us a little bit more about herself, and then we're going to get right into it.
Sounds good. Well, am I muted? Oh, I'm not muted. Okay, I had to make sure until I start talking, I'm muted. But good morning, Dr. Can, to all of our esteemed guests here today. Thank you for the opportunity to be in this space, and thank you for this collaboration with the Black First Gen Collective. It has been tremendous, and I think I speak for all of us when I say that we have definitely enjoyed. I am Dr. Evangeline D.B. Hudson. For those who look at the name and be like, what is going on? It's Evangeline, but I go by Dr. Eve, and I'm the founder and chief strategist of Evangeline Worldwide, which is an entity that empowers first-generation scholars and graduates across the globe. We do this in a few ways. One, through our signature talks, Pass the Mic, through our one-of-a-kind store, the First Gen Shop, through our award-winning podcast, the First Gen Lounge, as well as through our online learning platform, the First Generation University. So got a lot going on there. And when I'm not caught up in one of my projects for my business, I'm an adjunct professor of higher education at Bellarmine University. A very proud, clearly HBCU graduate, first generation, and just really excited about the conversation we're going to have today about the career exploration for those of us who are Black and first gen and students and staff and just all the goodness.
Yes. And I checked out your website and the gear, so I might have to go on it and purchase some gear.
Okay,
some
come through.
So we're gonna get right into it. The last couple of months, I've had this conversation or heard this conversation, though I felt it happening in the last couple of years. this idea of the great resignation or the great exodus of higher ed professionals. Can you speak to what impact that is having on HBCU professionals?
Ooh, we starting off heavy. So for context, HBCUs only make up 3% of institutions in the United States. So that's just a little bit, right? Just a little bit. However, HBCUs generally produce 20% of the Black graduates. Okay. So HBCUs have a lot of work to do, but it's a small field. It's kind of like being in a team project and 3 people doing everything. You got those 4 who you like punch in the face. So, and the thing is that with HBCU professionals, with being at a HBCU, we know that it's tradition and it's pride and it's culture. It's a safe space. You know, I speak for myself. Being at a HBCU, I go to school and I have to worry about race, right? But what happens when your people aren't there to serve your students? When you're already just 3% of an entire population of entities, and now people aren't there. I can think of 3 or 4 schools now where almost entire departments have left in this resignation, right? And that means students can't be retained. That means they're not going to be persisting. That means they're probably not going to graduate, which then means they're not being served. Your institution's not going to be served. You're going to have enrollment issues. Enrollment issues are going to turn into finance issues because, you know, a lot of institutions, especially private, are tuition based. So if you're not able to get students into the door because people are leaving because they can't get somebody on the phone to figure out something that's going on with admissions, or because a professor has left in the middle of the semester and students are now being put in classes where the classes are overpopulated and then they don't want to show up. And let's not forget, right now we are fighting a pandemic still, right?
Yep.
It creates a domino effect of issues that's the last thing we need at our Black institutions.
Mm-hmm. And so some of the things that you hit on that I want to kind of expand on is when you think about, we're already small in numbers, right? And then there's, you know, in the past year, this uptick in talking about more from an athletic standpoint, more of our Black athletes that would normally be recruited and go to these top PWIs are being recruited and coming to our HBCU. So, you know, one shout out Jackson State University hiring their head coach, Deion Sanders, and bringing all those recruits. And then when you talk about retention, if the people that don't look like me aren't showing up, or not coming, or leaving these campuses, what impact is that having on the enrollment process of us bringing in more students, particularly Black students, to our campuses? And so my question is, and this is gonna be a loaded.
Come on.
Whose responsibility, if anybody's, is it for us to ensure that we have Black professionals at HBCUs?
Why you do that to me?
I'm just saying.
Whose responsibility? I think it's dual responsibility. I think it's a responsibility of the institution itself, the administration. And I think also for students, they have to be responsible for themselves as well. And let me explain why I say that. For institutions, we already know that at PWIs, we are far and few in between. Right. And typically individuals who are working at PWIs, who are PWIs, predominantly white institutions, I think we all know that here, right? But I think some of the challenge and hardship for them is being that 1 or 2 people that everybody wants to come to. Yeah. And so, but thinking about the HBCU, it's kind of like we take it for granted, like it's almost understood that they just gonna be there for the students. But as students, HBCU or PWI, we have to encourage our students to seek out the help and the people that they need, right? And I think about, there was a couple protests that happened, we don't call no names, a couple protests that happened not too long ago. We have to encourage students to not only protest when it's good for the community, but even when it's within our campus community, right? Because what we tell our students is kind of like being children, right? I do what I say, not as I do, but don't talk back. So we don't encourage our students to have a voice and even learn how to speak up and say for what they need, but students can't be scared. I think some of the cultural dynamics we have being Black and things that we're taught that spill over into our adulthood and professional, environments, especially the HBCUs, makes it hard to navigate those waters. So I think, again, it's a two-way street for administrators to recognize we do need these people. We do need to pay them competitive salaries. We do need to treat them like humans and not disrespect them like they kids, right? But then we need students to say, this is what I need if you need and want me here, because at the end of the day, people don't like for me to say it, or I say for me, but anybody say it. A lot of people don't agree. Higher education is still business. Yes. So at the end of the day, it is for us to retain our students like we retain our customers and our businesses. So that's what I'm gonna give you there, Dr. K.
And in speaking to this, a really quick shout out to Tennessee State University with the hiring of Eddie George as well. So that the chat, I give a shout out to that. But also, in your response, speaking to the fact that, so let me stay here. Okay. Our institutions, our HBCUs, most are becoming more diverse racially. So typically we can go into a conversation and say we need more Black professionals at our HBCUs, or we need to retain our Black professionals, but we also need to be aware of the student demographics and what they need, right? And a lot of times you need people that look like you that may have similar experiences working at those institutions. So I just wanted to say that. But the other piece and the responsibility, I agree. I think it's twofold. When you have an institution and even an institutional organization, right, you develop what that culture is. And when you hire people to come, too many times we sell people on a culture that we aspire to be rather than the culture we are. And that's part of why some professionals may leave. But nonetheless, speaking from an HBCU experience, someone who did not go to an HBCU, but majority of my profession has been at an HBCU, the culture shock in that. And the fact that when you talk about resources, human resources, physical resources, and I'll just be very transparent, I'm an office of one. But I also know that the work that I do, I have colleagues at other institutions, mostly predominantly white, that would make a little bit more, if not a lot more, than what I make doing the same thing. And we have to think about the context of systemic racism, oppression that our institutions have faced since 1837. So we're not being funded or getting the funds in any way compared to other institutions, unlike us. And so when it comes down to salary and what we can offer and can't offer, that discourages a good number of Black professionals for even wanting to apply, let alone I work here, you're not going to give me a raise, so it's now time for me to move on.
Yes.
That context, and we're thinking about, because for me, as I've told you before, we can't develop students until we develop ourselves. So given that context, how do we as HBCU professionals who understand the mission of our institutions, that want to be here despite low salaries or low resources, we want to do the work, how do we reframe our development to continue forth in these spaces?
So I want to tap into something you just mentioned about the salary piece, right? Because I actually studied job satisfaction and dissatisfaction of HBCU professionals, entry level in housing, okay? And one of the things I found was the ability to be promoted was one of the reasons why people were dissatisfied, and also salary was another reason why people were dissatisfied. So if you can't even bring in the best talent, sometimes that hurts HBCUs when we think about that Great Resignation. But leading back into this question with development, people so focused on being disgruntled in their work, they're not even thinking about it. And they can't even imagine how to afford it, or they're expecting, like, you and I had talked about earlier, for the institution to pay for those professional development opportunities. And when it doesn't happen, do I go forward? No, because my job is supposed to do that. Let's pump the brakes. A part of knowing what to do in terms of development for self is even thinking about what development means to you. What do I need right now to be better in this job? And not just for this job, but what do I need to be better 5-10 years on down the line for who I want to be? We can't wait for people on our campus, our administration, our supervisors, to give us permission to be great. That's the thing. So if there are books out there that need to be read, the conferences need to be gone to, if you need to start a side hustle, to get a little money to go to that conference, that's what you need to do. But I think in terms of development, there's so many ways to be developed. And here's the thing, when we develop ourselves, when we think about books that we're reading that have been helpful, in conversations, we can tell students about them. So what we do is start to model that behavior and start to model what development looks like. We can encourage our students. We can't encourage our students to do what we don't do. Don't make sense. We can't. It doesn't make sense to. I can't tell a student that I'm not going to accept this late work, right? If I'm turning in late work to my professors when I was in grad school, that's why I have a no late work policy. Because at the end of the day, what I'm teaching you is you can't go to a job, a 9 to 5 or otherwise, and think you're going to turn an assessment report that's got $100,000 on the line late. That's not going to work. And so it's being able to transfer those skills, but thinking about, again, for yourself, what do you need, and being honest with yourself about what you need to develop, and then going and get it. So that means if you need to take a couple of days off because your boss not going to let you off, take them days. take them vacation days, because at the end of the day, if something happened to you, if something happened and needed to make budget cuts, they're not going to be thinking about how loyal you are, how special you are, how sweet you are. They're going to be about the business. And the last thing that we want to do is not be positioned or ready to be able to make transitions because we sat in a corner and only did what we needed to do to get by and to get this check that they're giving us that they can so easily take away.
Yes. And the transparency, owning our truth. And so part of that in the last conversation last week, we hit on a lot around what in all 3 sessions prior to this, Black first-gen professionals that work at HBCUs, and how we own our truth to utilize that as a space to connect with first-gen. And what you said is important because that connection ties into how we can help our Black first-gen at HBCUs really explore career options.
Yes.
I'll be honest, I never thought I'd be in a career in student affairs. I didn't even think it existed. I unfortunately had to just fall upon it. But now I'm in spaces where I can have these conversations, especially with my Black first-gen students, about what is a career in student affairs, what is a career in higher ed, and how to get there. So when you think about, moving the needle a little further from how we reframe our development, but what can we be doing? What do we need to start doing to advance or broaden the exploration of careers for our Black first-gen students?
I like this question because, I'm about to hit you with the entrepreneurship. But really, we have to first stop by putting students in a box. And we have to stop projecting our fears onto our students, right? Our fears, our perspectives on what life is supposed to be. Who would have ever thought that people would be making multi-millions, right? Because of this thing we call influencers. So when students come to us now with ideas about things that they want to do or ways that they want to explore the world, we have to listen to them and hear them. One of the things I find interesting, and this is just coming from my Black self, is what and how we're treated and taught professionalism. And I think far too often as Black people, and I'm trying to speak for the whole bunch, but there are several folks who take Blackness and professionalism and they try to make it whiteness. So even if you think about going to career development and what it means to be a professional, to wear this suit, to wear this ties, and to get ready for corporate, not every student wants to go into a corporate environment. So you're only training them to think and feel one way about the world. I never felt empowered in a business suit. I never did. But that was what I needed to do. I was going to grow locks at one point. Never made it. Never got to the locks, right? But I was told you should get your hair laid down and, nice and presentable like a young woman. What does that mean, right? So even as Black people, what we think about professionalism and success, we're going to have to reframe that as well, because what that allows us to do is get students to be more creative about how they can use their degrees. For the first time in my life as an entrepreneur, I'm using every last one of my degrees. My podcast is Mass Comm. What I do through my business is higher education, adjacent. I'm still doing research. I'm still pulling, stats to know how to be able to serve institutions. I'm using all of them. Students don't get to see that. in my opinion, you know, at HBCUs, because go and do this and follow this path, and this is how you be successful. But what do you say? Dr. Monk Morgan having a conversation the other day, and she mentioned, you know, in the future, her son having a computer engineering degree, I believe it is, computer science, but getting to help older people in the neighborhood, right? And being able to service them. That's entrepreneurial thinking. Because maybe I don't want to go in a corporate environment. We need to tell our students that that's okay, but we also have to be okay with doing things ourselves and being willing to step outside of the boxes and the spaces that we've been in that people have long made us feel unworthy and unvalued in, and to say, I can't wait for you to give me a raise. I was at an institution, got a degree, advanced, and was waiting for a raise. They wouldn't give it to me. So how do I give myself a raise? I got my side hustle, right? The side hustle becomes the hustle, but so many things I feel with that, but we have to be willing to explore too. Again, it's the modeling of behavior. And again, teaching students that there's more than one way and one path to success. Mark Zuckerberg, multi-billionaire. And whenever you see him, what is he wearing? T-shirts and the jeans. Nobody ever taught us that. Tristan Walker, first generation college graduate, Black man, the first person in Procter & Gamble's 180-year history, got his company Bevel, right, bought by them. He's under them, the first Black person ever. And when I see Tristan have on some type of hoodie, he has some kind of tee, like that's another vision of success. He's paid his dues, he's put in his time, but we have to stop making, again, students and HBCUs think there's only one way. I went on about that, didn't I?
We're going to keep going because I like that. I have a couple of stories, but one that comes to mind is I remember a student maybe 4 or 5 years ago here on HBC where I work, and he was getting ready to graduate. It was his senior year. And I said, you're excited about graduating? Like, where you going to work and all this stuff? And he said, at the time, I wasn't a doctor. He said, Miss Dixon, can I be honest with you? And I was nervous because I was like, this you better not tell me you're not graduating, right? And he said, I only came to college because my mama wanted me to. And I was like, okay. He was like, I want to be a music artist. So I majored in music, but I'm not using the degree. At least in that moment, he didn't think that he would be using that degree. He wanted to do music. And after that conversation, I started to have more conversations with students and recognizing a theme. One, that most students that I talked to came to college because at the request of a parent or a close family member. Because they didn't make it, so they need to, or this mentality that you have to go to college to be successful. So, tying college to success. And then the other thing was they were picking majors based on how much money they would make, though the majors and occupations they didn't want to do.
Yes.
And these students were normally juniors and seniors. So, it's kind of difficult to have those conversations though. We got to start all over again. So I learned in talking to students about this, and most of them were Black first gen students, is that, okay, you want to go into music, but your major is accounting. Let's talk about how that can work together. Because if you know accounting and all the ins and outs of that, that's going to help you, one, read, contracts, decide on what you need to save and do in terms of going to the music industry. Because you just can't get out here and just say, I'm a rap, sing, or whatever, and I'm making the money. And so when we began to have conversations of bridging those gaps, so we take in the reality of what I want to do and the reality of what I'm majoring in to make it a career, the excitement on their faces. Now, it made me more tiresome because they kept coming back to the office. It was great to see the excitement now, because they went from, oh, I got to go take this accounting test, to now, yeah, I got to go take this accounting test and I'll be right back because I thought about some ways that I can use what I learned in class the other day to help me in my music career. I'm thankful that you brought up this idea of what we believe professionalism is and what we often see it as. And so to kind of carry on with that conversation, what do we need to do? What can we do? Especially speaking to those HBCU professionals that are truly committed to having those ongoing conversations with students or putting programs into place that go outside of the norm of what we're used to? What are some strategies that we can begin to do?
I like that question. And I like also, there was a question I think I saw in the comments about how do we take and bottle that entrepreneurial mindset as well, right? Because it blends right together. I think one thing we can start to create space for students at institutions, even if it's just a student club, right? Because not every institution has a business program or entrepreneurial program that's like, number one. But I think doing that and giving students a space to think and be creative. As an entrepreneur, one of the things that I find to be most beneficial is this thought tank, right? A mastermind group. What would happen if you set students who were interested and just had some thoughts, like entrepreneur club, what do you want to do? What's your major? What do you want to do? And let people just shoot off ideas. It's amazing what happens when you have a synergy of folks who have different experiences, different contexts and connections that can bring things to your attention that also takes some of the load off of the professionals, right? But also gives you ideas. It's exchanging, energies. Right. Far too often are we siloed, right? I'm gonna do my thing over here and you do your thing over here. But what if all the departments on campus, right? The different colleges could come together and say once a month, let's have a student think tank. Let's talk about your career, in collaboration with career development. What do you want to do? And let students share and get feedback and ideas from their community. I think that's one way of thinking about it and going about the approach that also makes it a collective. I like that word collective, right? That brings people together. But even again, thinking about your careers, this is what we tap into our networks, right? Not just at HBCUs, but at also PWIs and just around the way. How many of us are Greek, who have LBs and LSs who are doing crazy things, who can come in and talk to our students about their path and how they got to where they were. Yes, does it create a little bit more work for us to arrange it and put it together? Maybe, maybe not. Take your classes and take your programming, and center it around these things. And the other thing is stop trying to do everything by yourself. I said earlier, the whole collective, but what happens if you come together with a different department, you bring your budgets together and y'all are co-planning programs? It takes the burden off of you. Again, so often in offices of one, maybe two if you're lucky, right? To be able to do things together and to utilize each other's resources. But there's so many things that can be done, right? But I think the other thing is trusting yourself to know that you can only do as much as you can do as well to help your students, right? But it's still up for them to go get what they need for themselves, but you can encourage it. Like they say, you can bring the horse with water, but you can't make them drink. Yeah. As long as you are providing them with resources and opportunities, as long as you're thinking creatively yourself, like how did you solve problems in grad school? How did your professors help you solve problems? What kind of programs did you go to that you thought were good? What are things you've always wanted to do and just try it out? If you have the room and space to do that at your institutions, do that, right? And mark it and name it, make it yours, right? So you can be like, I did that, I left that, so, but students first. And I know we care about students first, but just giving them a space to just be whoever they need and want to be, but giving them the feedback and those kind of spaces.
Yeah, and I see in the comments, someone stated shifting the narrative of what it means to be successful is important. And I consider myself, and most people call me the disruptive scholar, and brand disrupting the narrative, disrupting the narrative for positive change. Because when you hear the word disrupt, you tend to think negative, right? Yes. But reframing that word towards positive change, and that's what we need to be doing in our spaces. And as you were talking, I immediately thought of this whole concept of what is the American dream, how we have used that as our destination within the Black community at times. And now we are shifting because we're seeing a lot more entrepreneurs in our Black community. Yes. If I'm not mistaken, I heard or read somewhere that Black women are the leading entrepreneurs in the world. Yeah. And when you think about that and you tie in being a Black first gen student at an HBCU, yet the environment at the institution doesn't typically give you the space or autonomy to begin to practice or get that entrepreneur spirit. What are some things that you would say to those Black women, knowing you are the leading entrepreneurs in the space?
Talk about the students. What about the staff?
That part too.
Because I've experienced ageism and sexism at an HBCU. It's real.
Yes.
And it's studied. Okay. I ain't just making it up. Everything research backed. But what I would say to those women really is, again, don't wait. I mean, find the influencers. I think Mr. O'Neill, Kelly O'Neill, said something very significant in a conversation earlier this month, that as much as we can take our social media platforms and they can be negative things, we can make them good things. Find people who are doing things you want to do, and don't be afraid to reach out to those people. But even so, I think as women especially, we can't fear what the world has to say about us and who we are, because the world wouldn't be what it is without us. How you think we all got here? We all had to pass through a woman, okay? Mm-hmm. And so, so I think in our power, once we know our power, especially as Black women, and who we are and what we do, and just showing up time and time again, I think that we will start thinking differently about what's possible for us. It's possible for us as Black women to make six figures. It's possible for women invested businesses, or women investors, period, actually do better than men. Research shows that. Women who are in business typically do better over the long haul. But of course, we have to fight some of the systematic racism and, again, sexism as well. But create your own space. You don't got to wait for anybody. Create your own space. That's what I say. But be the woman for the, that you need to be for the woman who needs you. And I say that, even in general for people, period, but for the woman, right? I knew I needed to be myself, not my weirdo self, because I used to think maybe I'm just a little different. I want to do my hair a little different. I want my clothes a little different, but I'm just being myself, because there's a woman out there, a young woman out there, who needs me to show up so she can free herself too, and then serve other women who need her. So it becomes, again, another domino effect. But until you recognize your power and your value, will you let people shrink you? Yeah. But we're too big, too powerful to be shrink.
That's good. That's good. Because I think about, the conversations I've had with, some of our students on campus in the past. And we have real transparent conversations where they get to know me a little bit more, and they realize, oh, Dr. Dixon, you got your own business, you wrote a book, you got a radio show, like you do all of this stuff and this? How does that work? What does that look like? I'm like, yeah, I do. And I work with so-and-so who owns that. And they begin to realize that staff is more than just the position that they hold on campus, which opens up a different dialogue, especially for our Black first-gen students, to have conversations of where I can go after college, what I can do, and having the support, because typically they just see us as the position. And we talked about it a little bit earlier on, but when we think about owning our truth as HBCU professionals, even outside, because I also hear the saying, you keep your personal life outside the office, and when you come to work, you just stick to the work in front of you. But how has that limited us in connecting with our students, especially Black first-gen students, and also limited us in the retention space? Because I know for a fact that if some of our truth, some of our stories about our college experiences, career explorations were shared with students, they would stay the course because they know someone on campus that went through a similar situation and got out of it. And if I can just stay connected to that person in whatever format, whether they stay on the campus or leave the university, I can make it too.
Man, let me go back. Something that came to mind was the women's empowerment. More institutions, more campuses should be hosting women's empowerment summits and conferences for their students with their alum. Shaw does it and has been doing it for years, and it's been tremendous because they're seeing alum come out of the institution who are doing a variety of things, talking about a variety of things, right? They do a men's summit as well, same day they do them, and men connect with men, women connect with women. So that's one idea I want to throw out there that you all could do. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. It could be virtual, because virtual ain't going nowhere. Right. But coming back into the space of how do we, you got to trust yourself more than you trust the environment that you're in. Let me say that, because I know that there are certain people that I can tell a little bit more to, but you have to be the judge of that. You have to trust that intuition and know with these students, I'm building a relationship. But if I can tell you this thing and I'm not going to be embarrassed about it, I'm not going to feel any kind of way about it coming back around, then those are the things you tell. but
Yeah.
it's being honest and being real and being raw. Because I think a lot of students, like they don't get that at home, right? How many times did things happen with mama or grandma or auntie and it was never talked about? And then when they done died, all the secrets come out. You'd be like, well, how did I miss this? It's being able to, again, set the example and be okay with woman to woman conversations. But again, if you can't have that, creating space with other women, I think community is so big and we so miss it, right? What would you do if you brought just women together and a couple professionals? Let's talk about, boys right now, or these young men, and what's going on with y'all in these relationships, and teaching and showing them. I've had felt relationships too. It humanizes you, but I think you have to know your professional boundaries yourself. But students get it, right? Because there's certain things you just don't talk about. And we have to stop thinking students don't know better. Have to stop thinking that they can't handle it. Because here's the thing, Dr. K, now you triggered me. We are preparing these students for the what's next.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can't start treating them like adults and having adult conversations, what favors are we doing them? Right? To expect them to leave and, oh, let me be blocked off and this is all you get. But did that help you? So we have to stop passing down these toxic behaviors in so many ways. And being vulnerable doesn't mean I'm putting you out within my business, but it means that there's certain things I can teach you without even telling you about what I've been through.
Right.
Something I've learned over my life is you should probably handle this way. Have you ever thought about this? You don't have to tell your business to share wisdom. And we got to find that space for ourselves.
Yeah, and the concept that just came to me that I haven't fully thought out, but I'm gonna put it out here, is this idea that we think we're protecting them from something. And so I go back to thinking about my brand and recognizing that we all have different journeys, and that I can't protect you from your feelings, and you can't protect me from mine. And I can't protect you. I can give you tools to prepare you for change. And I just read somewhere that leadership is about preparing your people for change. And if we had that mentality as HBCU professionals working with Black First Gen, that I'm preparing you for change, whatever that may look like, rather than trying to protect you from everything. I'm not keeping you in a box, but I'm giving you tools so that you can be so holistic in any space that you go. Because I believe that we need to get to a space, whether we're, being professionals at a HBCU or WIMSI, that we need to begin to teach students how to own their truth, be more vulnerable about their truth, and how that's going to impact them in every space in their life. Because holistic wellness, holistic well-being, I can't be so focused on my occupation in college that I neglect my physical, my mental, my emotional, my environment. Environments will change, but if I learn how to stay consistent in my purpose and my well-being, I don't care which space I go into, whether I go into a job that has nothing to do with what I went to school for, I can still be successful, and I know what that looks like for me.
Well, Dr. K, even if, because you just, again, thoughts. You can go into a space, but if you're not who you are, it's not going to matter anyway because you're not going to last.
Right.
It's going to be too uncomfortable.
Yes.
It's going to be too demeaning sometimes. It's just not going to work. So you have to. And I think that first part of like success, how you define success, right, is being fully honest about who you are so you can show up in every space as you are. Yes. Because you can try to hide your truth, but why do 48% of marriages end in divorce anyway? People scared to show their truth. And I think the thing is, like I had to learn, there is some space out there in the world where I'm going to be just fine. There is a community, there are people, there's a way, right? And so I think the more that we can remind students of this, can we encourage truth? Yes. But again, going back to some of the cultural things and what's happening at home, let's hide the truth. Let's, sweep it up under the rug. Let's not talk about it. We know that there's so many things that we're undoing even as professionals that are cultural, and it's bold and it's brave, because think about administration that's been on campus 40 years. And they have much different views than you do. And here you come with your progressive thoughts, Dr. K. I don't want to do that around here. So even in that, trying to find the balance between showing freedom and even cultural things. Look at how many LinkedIn posts we see these days with women so proud of taking their headshots with their natural hair.
Yeah.
So until we, and I love how you say disrupt it, right? Can change really even start to occur. So with that, reminding students that even if you try to hide who you are, it's going to catch up with you.
Yep, it will.
It's going to catch up with you. So you can't fake the funk, but for so long. In a workspace, in a relationship, in your business, you can't. Yep. So there's more benefits to being your real self, no matter what, than there are barriers. And that's just what it is.
And I'm a firm believer in practicing, educating, and teaching about self-awareness. I just wish we did more self-awareness types of programs, activities, education with, students as they begin to come into our institutions.
Absolutely.
To build that foundation. So we're almost at time before we get to questions and answers, but I have one more question.
Come on.
And I'm going to read it verbatim. What does it mean to experience imposter syndrome as an educated Black first-gen professional and or student?
The world is already hard enough, isn't it? It means to show up in a space to say, I've never been here before, but I'm going to make it. This looks different to me, but I'll figure it out. I may be uncomfortable, but I'll adjust, right? But there's also, coming from an HBCU, going back to what we said, truth and power. I graduated knowing that I could take on the world, knowing I had come from a historical bloodline of Black excellence. HBCU, I feel powerful when I say that. I love knowing I'm an HBCU grad. I married an HBCU grad, right? He first gen too. Shout out to Bae. But I struggled initially because I was so used to having to call everybody Miss and Mr. and Doctor. And I mean, I understand, the respect, but I still had in my mind sometimes the struggle of when I was in a professional space, being able to call Jenny, and Dominique, and I be Eve. And I had people say, please call me by my first name. So to still sometimes feel, one, what am I doing in the world? But then two, my culture in some ways have taught me that I need to, anybody older, I don't challenge. So how can I ask for a raise or a salary, get what I want if I don't feel comfortable challenging adults? So working through helping that mind shift and that thinking about who you are and what you are to be in this world, that you are strong and you can compete at the same level, if not higher, with other people, right? But I had to shake that because my Blackness and my first genness and my womanhood, these intersections used to make me feel like I can't go to work and say some things because they're going to look at me like I'm crazy and think I'm angry. Or because I'm Black, I might be the only person, then I become representative of all the Black people. But what I say to you is we have to show up anyway. But if we show up in our truth, right? If we show up in our truth, if we show up in our power, we'll know that we can do anything. We'll know that we can go anywhere because who else decides? Nobody in my family has gotten a 4-year degree, but I'm going to go do this.
Right.
And then you do it. So the same mentality has to go with us, that if we were bold enough to go to college, in spite of the fact that nobody else had gone, right? Then we can go into workspaces and take space, and we don't have to apologize for doing so. Imposter syndrome is self-imposed because what we believe, right? What we believe about ourselves, but we also let people tell us to believe about ourselves becomes a narrative. Rewrite your story, and from here into forever, whatever your story is what you choose to make it. Yeah. And when we have that know-how, that power, we become legend.
Woo, okay. We're going to stop it right there. That's all y'all getting. We want to open up for questions from our audience that are here on the live recording, or any comments that you want to pose in the chat. So if you can go ahead and put those in the chat, we can answer them. As we're waiting for questions to come in, Dr. Eve, if you can kind of give us some ways that, we can contact you. Shout out some of your social media, whatever they call those things now, website, etc., so we can contact you all.
Absolutely. So my website, I'll drop everything in the chat for you all to be able to holler the player, but but it's so that rather than me saying you trying to write it down, you can just click it. But I will drop my website here. Can I drop it there? Yep. And then here is the email that's good for me. This will get you to my team who will definitely help us navigate. And I am on LinkedIn and what's that thing called? Facebook and Instagram. Look, I'm acting like I'm a baby boomer. No. Shout out to the baby boomers. But I'll tell you, like when I'm on my phone, sometimes I'm trying to use Zoom. I see what my grandma felt like trying to use a computer. So like I'm at that age now. But I'm on the social networks as Eve Hudson, PhD. So you can find me anywhere there.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at some of the comments. Dr. K, you can't just stop the sermon. So listen, when it comes to, and I'll trace it back to career exploration and Black Fresh Gen and the conversations that we talked about community and how important it is to have these conversations. The other piece to that is sometimes you need to be given a seed and you need to find ways to nourish that. Right. And so I hope that these webinars have been seeds for people and then begin to branch out to find other people, other communities to nourish that seed to what they want it to be. Let's see. We have a question. What are your thoughts about this representation and how they may influence people's careers?
HBCUs major media more than ever before, including NBA and NB2. Okay. So thoughts about it. I think that it's a starting point from my perspective. I think that from like a branding and marketing perspective, being able to at least get it out there in front of people, because how many people, because of some of the athletes, are just now coming to know what an HBCU is. While we don't want to make it just about the athletes, I think it's a great starting point. And I think even influence, right? Because why are people Chapel Hill fans, versus Duke? Did I just throw some shade? I love Chapel. Like I grew up loving Chapel Hill because of basketball. But think of how these institutions, in some regard, became household names. Athletics, are still very heavy and branded for institutions and get people excited because it's a part of that community engagement, right? So I think again, while it isn't the end all be all, it is a great starting point. And Jackson State's homecoming in November blew my mind. Now, I wouldn't have been out there, but 54,000 people in the stadium. Y'all don't think people looking at Jackson State right now? So right. I think, again, it's a strategic and power move, and I think it can be beneficial and, again, start the conversation for all of the other amazing and major things happening, law school, business schools, medical schools, at HBCUs, that veterinarian school, Tuskegee, Meharry, Howard, Central, North Carolina A&T, top engineering program in the country. So I think it's a good segue.
Mm-hmm. And that response was in regards to the HBCUs and major media outlets like the NBA and TV shows.
And then have influence people.
Can you talk about how our HBCU grads or students or associated entities are bringing recognition, to our institutions? And so, mentioning about, Megan Thee Stallion, who's a well-known rapper, who is also now a graduate of Texas Southern University. And students, young folks, that's what they're connecting to college and education now. Is who do they know that is successful in their eyes that went to these institutions, and now I need to look at that institution as a place for me to go.
Right? Absolutely, because it's a brand. It's a brand. Mm-hmm. I think with 2 Chainz, HBCU student, First Gen as well. Like there's several that are out there, but we don't talk about it, so we don't know. J. Cole, one of the hottest rappers. He's not HBCU, but he's Black First Gen, but it gets the conversation started, right? If I'm going to college and college choice. My brain is escaping me right now with the list of people, but shout out to Dr. Miles up in here, who I'm sure, you know, she got the First Gen and Juice, your go-to resource for First Gen and popular media. I would say go there because there's a list of people, Black First Gen, and even the HBCU element of it that comes up that I think is important. W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Ella Baker, so many. And we've been doing a Black First Gen history trivia all month, the Black First Gen Collective. So that's a good starting point for the information you need.
So as we're wrapping it up, and I don't see any further questions, what are some lasting thoughts that you can give our audience as it relates to career exploration and Black First Gen students at HBCUs?
So I have a piece. I don't have a poem, but I had a piece that I love to share with you all. Got up this morning and y'all know social media. And I had a memory from exactly 6 years ago today. I'm going to read you this memory because I think it's no coincidences, right? I wrote, one of my students asked a question today, Dr. E, how did you figure out what you wanted to do with your life? Of all the things for me to say, I naturally replied, the world is full of problems. When I came to know who I wanted to help and how I wanted to help them, I knew where I needed to be. The position title I have will change over the years, but taking into the account the advice of a wise man, I focus more on who I am rather than what I am. So I'll ask you this question. Who do you want to be when you grow up, and what things can you do that will allow you to be that person? Most of all, who will you help and how will you help them? So my reminder to each and every one of you who are here today, who've so graciously hung out with us I'm making words, who've been with us for this hour, don't get so caught up in what you are, because who you are transcends any position you'll ever be in, any title you'll ever have. Who you are is who you will be in a boardroom, in a Zoom room, on a panel, in a classroom, and be that person and serve those who you know you're meant to serve. And where and how you'll serve them will be multifaceted, but you'll always be doing the work you're supposed to do, and pass it along to your students so they too can be who they're supposed to be rather than what they think they're supposed to be.
That's good right there.
You gonna take that, Dr. K?
That's good right there.
Okay.
And I'm glad you said it, because we get so caught up in these titles and what I am and what I'm not, rather than focusing on who I am. And for me, it's also whose I am. We're gonna leave that. And so we had a question of where can they rewatch this. So all of the webinars are uploaded. The recordings of the webinars are uploaded to the NASPA Region 3 YouTube page. So give us about a couple of days up to a week to make sure that they're uploaded, but they will all be uploaded on the NASPA Region 3 YouTube page. Well, Dr. E, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for helping me wrap up the last webinar within my term. And thank you for having this dope discussion around career exploration and Black First Gen. There are definitely some nuggets that were dropped, and I hope that people had enough sauce to pick it up. But I am so thankful for you, and thankful for everyone that was able to join in on the live recording. And for those of you who are watching the re-recording, I hope that you re-watch it again, because I know there's something that you missed. And so thank you. And once again, thank you to the sponsors at NASPA and NASPA Region 3 for the opportunity to host the HBCUs Educate webinar series. It's definitely been my pleasure.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for what you do. Let me say this, and thank you for the legacy that you are leaving us with, for the conversations you've started. You're legend, Dr. K. And I don't say that lightly. Like we all see it. Somebody needed to start this conversation. So thank you for it. I'm looking forward to all you do ahead and how you'll serve and change the world in only the way that you can.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Y'all have a good one.